And I do think there is a better way of saying that without saying it as crazy as that. So, a lot of people are asking, is Arch Manning the man he is? Is it only because of his last name that everyone is hyping him up? How many teams in the NFL can you say have a better rushing game than a passing game? He has cemented himself as one of the best boxers of all time. Hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Ball Talk with Chanel. Sorry, I have been MIA for the past couple of weeks. I was a little sick, I had no energy, but now I'm back, I'm better, and we have so much to talk about that has happened in the last couple of weeks. So, as always, this episode is going to be split into 4 sections. In the first section, I will be talking about the WNBA. We are officially at the end of the regular season and we are starting the playoffs. So, before I talk about all of that, I want to talk about one big news that has happened in the last week that truly determines the future of a certain player. Then I want to recap the regular season, looking at the season leaders, give a shout out to a certain rookie, and give a little bit of a controversial take about this rookie. And then I want to look at the playoff picture and then give some predictions. In the next section, I will be talking about college football. I will be looking at a few teams, seeing how they're doing so far, looking at some of the big games that's happened this past weekend, and then also look at some of the big games that's supposed to be happening for this upcoming weekend. And then after that, in the next section, I will be talking about the NFL. Now, we are in the middle of the regular season. So, before I talk about all of that, I want to talk about a couple of trades that's happened that really has shocked everyone. I want to talk about a few injuries that's happened. And then I want to also recap some games that's happened in the last week. And then also talk about some of the big games that are coming up. And then in the last section, I want to talk about boxing. Now, on Saturday, we did have arguably one of the biggest matches of the century. Canelo Alvarez versus Terrence Crawford. So, I want to recap the match, what I thought about it, and then after that, I want to talk about a few of the big fights that are coming up and why I think they are so important. So, with all that being said, let's get started. So, starting with the first section, the WNBA. Now, before I start talking about the regular season, start talking about the playoffs, I want to talk one of the biggest news that has happened in the last week, and that is about Chicago Sky player Angel Reese. Now, if you didn't hear, Angel made some comments that are considered detrimental to her team. Just to paraphrase, she basically said that right now she wants to stay with the Chicago Sky for an entire career, but obviously she needs to think about herself and about her career, and there could be the possibility of her moving on. Now, she did continue on by saying that the team basically needs to get good players, they need to get great players, which some people looked at that as a dig to her current teammates. Now, the Sky did release a statement after Angel made those comments, basically saying that they are aware of the comments and they're going to be handling it internally. And then it was announced that Angel would be suspended for half a game for those comments, which ended up being her being out for the entire game with a back injury. Now, here's the thing. I don't think that Angel Reese was necessarily wrong. And stick with me here. The Sky were one of the worst performing teams this season. They were one of the worst performing teams last season, okay? Now, they don't have a lot of great players. I think the Sky getting rid of Kennedy Carter, especially from last season, truly hurts them. Because the Sky does not have a lot of guards. They seem to have more bigs than they do guards. It's almost like the opposite of what is happening with the Dallas Wings. So, I do agree with Angel in the fact that the team is really not that good and they do need to pick up some good players. With that being said, the way Angel did say it is a little crazy. It is a little crazy to say to another reporter and basically talk smack about your teammates. I do think that is a little bit insane because that really shows a little bit of immaturity, and I do think there is a better way of saying that without saying it as crazy as that. Nevertheless, the underlying message that she said is just not wrong. Also, too, with the fact that I feel like she should have also called out her coach because her coach is also bad, but I guess she didn't want to be suspended for any longer than what she was. But I do think the underlying message is factually correct. Now, a lot of people want to talk about how, oh, Angel is not good enough to be talking like this. Angel is averaging a double double. Okay? Angel is averaging 12 and 14. And even talk about the fact that her field goal percentage has especially improved this season. So I do think she is good enough to make those type of comments because at the end of the day, on this guy, who is having the same type of stats as Angel? Please name me one. I don't think you can because there aren't. Angel is, if you want to admit it or not, she is one of, if not the best player on her team. So I do think with her, especially being seen as the leader of the team, she does need to call out where there are some weaknesses. Now, again, there is a better way of saying it and not being extremely honest like that. There is a more professional way of saying that the team has a lot of weaknesses and that they need to get better and not try to put your teammates down because that's what it could be perceived as. But nevertheless, it is her responsibility to call out the weaknesses, especially when the coaches and the front office don't see it. Now, I don't think what Angel said was wrong. I think the bigger issue is how she said it. And I do think that's where Angel needs to understand that it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I do think if she said it a little bit better, a little bit more professionally, then she wouldn't receive as much backlash as she did. But I do think that her underlying message is not wrong. So let's see if this guy really does take her comment seriously and changes for the next season, or if they're just going to back away, not take accountability, and continue to just be a bad performing team in the future. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens. But I do want to move on and I want to talk about the regular season. So like I said in the beginning of this episode, we are at the end of the regular season already, which is absolutely insane. So let's look at the season leaders so far. So Asia Wilson leads the league in points per game with 23.2. Angel Reese leads the league in rebounds per game with 12.6. Alyssa Thomas leads the league in assists per game with 9.2. Asia Wilson leads the league in blocks per game with 2.3. Gabby Williams leads the league in steals per game with 2.3. Jessica Shepard leads the league in field goal percentage with 63.8. Kelsey Plum leads the league in total three-pointers made with 111. And Sonia Citron leads the league in three-point percentage with 44.5. So I love the fact of how great everyone has performed, how great the regular season was. It was super, super entertaining. But now we are looking at the playoff picture. So let's look at the 8 teams who are officially in the playoffs. So you have the Minnesota Lynx, the Atlanta Dream, the Las Vegas Aces, the Phoenix Mercury, the New York Liberty, the Golden State Valkyries, the Indiana Fever, and the Seattle Storm. Now, I do think that these were the top 8 teams in the league this season. I do think they were the best performing teams this season, but this officially means that the Sparks were so close, but yet so far because they are not in the playoffs. Now, I do think the playoffs are going to be a little interesting, right? Especially with a team like Minnesota playing Seattle. I do think that's going to be a sweep. Or like the Dream playing the Fever. I do think that is also going to be a sweep. But one series that I think that is going to be really interesting are the Phoenix Mercury and the New York Liberty. I do think that it's going to be a great series. I think that that's going to go to 3. I don't think there's going to be a sweep. I think we're going to see a true battle between the two teams. I do think effectively the New York Liberty are going to win, but I do think we are going to see a battle between them. That is the one series that I will say I think it will be a good first round. Now, after that, which is what I will talk about with for next week, I do think that the second round and then eventually getting to the finals is going to be really interesting. But I think the first round, I think the only series that I think that's going to be a true back and forth, I really am a 50-50 leaning more towards the Liberty, is the New York Liberty versus the Mercury. I do think that's going to be the one series where it will be a true battle. Now, outside of talking about the playoffs, there is one player that I want to talk about, and that is Paige Bueckers. Now, the Dallas Wings were also another team where they were just one of the worst performing teams in the WNBA. But that does not take away from how great of a season Paige Bueckers had. She averaged 19 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. Like, you can see that the Wings truly, truly needed her to at least make some sort of comeback and to also win their games. Now, just like I was talking about with the Chicago Sky, where they have a lot of bigs but not a lot of guards, the Wings are the complete opposite. They have a lot of guards but very, very little bigs. I do think that if you put a big or two and couple them with Paige and with Enrique, I think the Wings could truly, truly make a run. But keeping on the conversation about Paige, can I make this hot take and say that Paige had a better rookie season than Caitlin Clark? Here's why. Stick with me. So, Paige obviously had a great season on a worse team. I think with the Fever made so many trades and cuts and everything else like that in order to build the team around Caitlin, which is what you're supposed to do. But I think for Paige to be able to still put up those type of stats on a worse team, to me is a lot more impressive, right? And I think that Paige is a more complete player. She's a better defender. She's a better mid-range shooter, right? I think with the exception of the 3-point depth and the 3-point range, I think that Paige is overall the better player than Caitlin. And it's very interesting that a lot of people are not talking about this, right? I think a lot of people are afraid because Caitlin is supposed to be the face of the WNBA. She is supposed to be this megastar that's supposed to be the quote-unquote savior of the league. But let's really talk about the fact that Paige had a better rookie season on a worse team than Caitlin. That's my hot take. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but if you truly, truly watched Caitlin last season and watched Paige this season, and now I'm not saying look at highlights or look at social media posts. No, 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 no. I'm talking about purely sitting down and watching the Dallas Wings games. If you watched Paige and then you compare her to Caitlin last season, overall, I think Paige had the better season. And I don't want to hear anybody say, oh, well, Caitlin made it to the playoffs, because that's a team effort. And again, the Fever last year were a better team than the Wings are for this season. But like I said, a little bit of a hot take. I just wanted to give my flowers to Paige because I think she had a great rookie season. And I do believe she cemented her argument as to why she should be Rookie of the Year. Now, she is AP Rookie of the Year, but I'm talking about with the league, with the WNBA, I do think they should pick Paige as Rookie of the Year. I've said that so many times, and I do think that she has earned that right. Now, before I move on to the next section, I want to talk about WNBA CBA negotiations, because the CBA officially expires next month, the end of October. Now, there have been reports that came out a couple weeks ago that said that the league is basically dragging their behind. The reports are saying that the league is not really putting in any urgency, not really moving fast, and trying to come up with a mutually agreed upon CBA. Now, I don't know why they would want to drag their behind, because I've already talked about this in previous episodes, but basically, a lockout is the worst thing that could happen to the WNBA. I don't think there should be a lockout. I really don't. And I really do hope that the league recognizes and understands that, and then they are trying to push forward and hopefully have a little bit more urgency in trying to come up with a CBA that is mutually agreed upon. But if the league seems to have no urgency, then I think it's just a lose-lose situation on both ends. Because I've already talked about this in previous episodes, but I am going to just give a little bit of a summary. If you want to see my full breakdown, you can just watch the previous episodes. But basically, a lockout is just bad for both sides. It would basically drop viewership. People will not be interested anymore, right? The discourse around the WNBA will basically turn negative. Like, everything that could go wrong will basically go wrong. And all of the growth that the WNBA has experienced for the past couple of years would basically disappear. The league would basically have to start all over. So I think a lockout is the worst thing that the league can do, that the players can do. So I really do hope that both sides can come to an agreement before the expiration. I have faith that they are going to. I think we are going to see an agreed upon CBA within the next month. That is just my personal prediction because I really don't think that both sides, in their best interest, would want the CBA to expire and go into a lockout. I don't think that either side really wants that, which is why I am optimistic that they will come to an agreement within the next month. But we're going to have to wait and see what the reports say. We're going to have to wait and see what happens. And hopefully there is just no lockout whatsoever. So now let's move on to the next section, which is all about college football. Now, we just wrapped up week 3, which means that we are going to be starting week 4 on Thursday. So I want to talk about a few teams that I think everyone should be looking out for. First one, of course, being USF. Now, this was a team that I think a lot of people did not expect to be as good as they were. Now, they did beat the crap out of Boise State week 1. They had the big upset win over Florida, winning 18-16. But then they just faced Miami and they got blown out. Now, I do think the Hurricanes, of course, are a way stronger team than USF. I am a big fan of the quarterback. I think Byron Jones is actually a good quarterback. I just don't know if USF has enough to be able to compete with your Hurricanes, your Ducks, your Buckeyes. I don't think they have enough to be able to compete in that upper echelon. Now, even though they are currently not ranked anymore, I do think the fact that we saw the 1 week where USF was a top 20 team in the country, I thought was really interesting. Now, I do think, though, that USF will have enough where I think they could be a top 25 team. I think they'll probably end the season probably ranked like 24th, maybe 25th. But I don't think that they will have enough to make it to the college football playoffs at the end of the season. But you never know. Let's just see, because I was shocked that they beat Florida the way that they did. I mean, that was all a big shock. That's all a big surprise. So we'll just never know what happens until it just gets there. We're just going to have to wait and see. Now, the next team, of course, I want to talk about is Texas. Now, of course, Texas is one of the most hyped teams for this season, and especially they are hyped because of their quarterback, Arch Manning. Now, he is finally the starting quarterback after sitting behind Quinn Ewers for 2 seasons. So, a lot of people are asking, is Arch Manning the man he is? Is it only because of his last name that everyone is hyping him up, or does he actually have the talent to back it up? Now, week 1, they did face Ohio State, and Arch really did not look good. He didn't look comfortable. He didn't look like he was in his rhythm. All the passes looked really forced, but also, too, just not to put the entire blame on him, I didn't quite understand the play calling in that game. I think Sarkisian and the Texas team just did not do a good job when it came to the play calling and putting Arch in the right situations in that game. But week 2 against San Jose State, I think that Arch actually looked a lot better. He looked a lot more comfortable. And then we get to this past weekend where they face UTEP, and Arch really did not look good. He only threw for a little over 100 yards. We threw 1 touchdown pass. I'm not quite sure what happened. Yes, did Texas win? Yes, they did win, okay? I'm not saying that UTEP pulled the ultimate upset. But what I'm saying, though, is for a team like UTEP, you should be able to blow them out, okay? Arch should have been able to throw for over 200, almost 300 yards. That's the type of team that you need to absolutely go off. So the fact that Arch did not go off against UTEP is really putting a red flag on everyone's mind of, is Arch Manning truly overrated? Is he truly overhyped? Now, I don't think that he is overhyped. I don't think he is overrated. I do think he is a great quarterback. I think it's just all of the pressure that is just on him, between him coming from a legacy family to him being at one of the biggest football programs in the country. You know, all of the blame is going to be on him. If the team loses, no matter how good he performs, it's all going to be on him. I think it's all of that pressure that's just built up on him. I think that's a problem. And that's just me as of right now. My opinion could change by week 7, week 8. Okay, so my opinion right now is I don't think he's overhyped. I don't think he is overrated. Now, with that being said, they do have their upcoming game against Sam Houston. Now, Sam Houston is another team where I think that Arch should be able to throw for over 200 yards, almost 300 yards. This should be the game where he is absolutely going nuts. And I think this game is truly going to be the test as to whether Arch is really that guy or not. Here's why, okay? Now, you can argue with UTEP. You know what? He's still trying to get comfortable. He still is blah, 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 right? San Jose State people didn't feel he did that good. Okay, whatever. UTEP, he really didn't look that good. Okay. But if Sam Houston, and this is the third game where people don't see a lot of production from Arch, that is really going to hurt his draft stock if he decided that he wanted to come out for next year's draft. It's going to hurt his perception in the media. It's just going to make everything for Arch look really, really bad. So I do think that this game against Sam Houston is the game where Arch really needs to step it up. He needs to have that big production game, and he needs to have that big game to really show, yes, I am that dude. Yes, there is a reason why I was ranked number 1 overall in my class. So I'm excited for that game. I do think, though, that Arch is going to have a big game, but let's see what happens. Now, speaking of, I want to talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, they did come into week 1 being ranked 3 in the country, but now they are bumped up to being the top team in the country. They looked great against Texas week 1, which I've already spoken about. They looked great against Grambling State. And then this past weekend, they faced the Ohio Bobcats. Now, Ohio State did end up winning, okay? They did win 37-9. But I did have a little bit of a concern watching that game. Why? Because you ended the first half being up only by 10, and then in the beginning of the third quarter, you're only up by 4. Now, obviously, they did pick it up by the third and fourth quarter, but seeing Ohio State be up by only 4 against Ohio Bobcats really, really raises a little bit of an alarm for me. Now, they do have a new quarterback, okay? They do have Julian Saints, so it's not like they have Will Howard like they did last season. But maybe there was an issue of, okay, well, Julian was just making really bad passes, or there weren't any good plays that were being called. Whatever the issue may be, that should have been a game where Ohio State should have won by like 60 or 70 points. So, am I overall extremely concerned that Ohio State is not going to make it to the playoffs? No, I'm not that concerned. But seeing Ohio State be only up by 4 really, really made me a little bit concerned for a second. So hopefully they won't make that same mistake. Hopefully it will be a scenario where they will be able to blow out all the teams that they are supposed to blow out. Hopefully that is the case. But seeing the 4 points really, really made me a little bit concerned. Now, the next team that I want to talk about is Alabama. Now, they were a top 10 team going into week 1, and then we saw that Florida State, Tommy Castellanos, and the Florida State Seminoles beat the crap out of Alabama. Now, the score was 31-17, right? So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Florida State won by 60 or 70 points. No, clearly you can see they won by 2 possessions. But point being was that Alabama was truly struggling against Florida State. And Florida State was unranked at that point. So that dropped them down to all the way to 21st as a ranking. Now, they did have their comeback blowout win against UL Monroe. They themselves just beat Wisconsin by 24, so they have been having such big wins. But I think that loss against Florida State, that blowout loss, really, really stuck with them. Now, I will say I am not the biggest fan of Ty Simpson. I don't feel that he can really read the defense really well. I don't think that he can throw really well. I think he does make a lot of sloppy passes, but I will give him the benefit of the doubt, okay? It is his first season as the starting quarterback. He is still young. He's still trying to learn. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But right now, I have not seen a lot from him. I don't think he really is that good. But maybe he could pick it up. But let's see how Alabama performs for the rest of the season. And then the last team that I want to talk about is, of course, the Miami Hurricanes. Now, I think there were a little bit of a concern as to how Carson Beck would perform with the Hurricanes. We did see how he was performing against Georgia. He really did not look that good. So there was a little bit of a question, right? Will Carson Beck be able to fill in the big shoes that Cam Ward left from last season, right? And so far, I wouldn't say that he's having a Cam Ward type of season, But he is having a bounce back season. He is having a pretty good season. I mean, he had a great game against Notre Dame. He had a good game against Bethune-Cookman. I mean, he also had a great game against South Florida just this past weekend. I mean, he is so far having a great season. I mean, he is on the watch for being a potential Heisman candidate. That's how good of a season he is having. So now there really is the question of, was Carson Beck bad last season, or was the O-line just not that good? Because watching Georgia, for example, face Tennessee, you can really see that Georgia's O-line is really not that good, right? So Carson, maybe to be fair to him, the O-line was not that good, and that's why he was getting sacked a lot. That's why he had to force a lot of passes, right? So maybe it could be because the Hurricanes have a stronger O-line. He feels more comfortable. He's able to make better plays. Now, this is me just talking right now. Of course, everything could really change in the future. But right now, I'm not going to lie. I've been watching him, and I've been really, really impressed. So hopefully he is able to keep it up for the rest of the season. But now I want to talk about some of the big games that are coming up for this upcoming weekend. So we have Texas Tech facing Utah. Now I do think this is going to be a good game. The Red Raiders right now are off to a great start, being undefeated, but Utah is a very, very tough team. Now Texas Tech does have great offensive weapons, but look, Utah has a good defensive team. So they really could give Baron Morton such a hard time. They could give that O-line a hard time. Let's see if the Red Raiders will be able to keep up with them. I do think that Utah is going to win. I do think Utah is probably going to win by 2 or 3 points. I do think it's going to be a one-possession game. I think it's going to be a very close game. But I think Utah just has a little bit of a stronger team, and I do think that it will give the Red Raiders such a hard time. Now, the next game that I want to talk about is Syracuse versus Clemson. Now, Clemson, of course, just dropped to not being a ranked team anymore after they had their upset loss against Georgia Tech. They lost 24-21. Now, they are facing Syracuse, who is also unranked. But we know how Syracuse especially performed last season, right? How they were giving teams such as Miami a hard time. I do think that Syracuse is a pretty good team. I think that this is going to be a close battle. I do think, though, that Clemson should be able to win, but I do think that it's not going to be a walk in the park for Clemson. I think they're truly going to fight and battle and struggle, and it's going to be probably a field goal that's going to allow them to win. But I think this is going to be a good game to watch. Now, the next game I want to talk about is Oklahoma versus Auburn. Now, John Mateer is having a great season. I mean, he is the odds of just winning the Heisman Trophy, period. That is how great of a season John Mateer is having. But we see here how Auburn is also having a great season so far. We see how tough of a defense that they have, how good their offensive weapons are. So I think this is also going to be a good battle. I do think that Oklahoma is going to win. But again, just like Syracuse and Clemson, I do think that this is going to be a close battle. I think it will be another one where it will be a field goal that will win it all. I wouldn't even be shocked if this game went into overtime. That is how good of a game I think that this battle between Oklahoma and Auburn is going to be. I cannot wait for this game. Now, the next game that I want to talk about is Michigan versus Nebraska. Now, Bryce Underwood for Michigan is truly having a good season so far as the starting freshman quarterback for the Wolverines. He is having a good season. He's really looking like the new face for the Wolverines. But they are facing Nebraska, and Dylan Raiola right now is looking a little bit like Patrick Mahomes, a little too much, right? We all know the big joke about how he looks like him, how he dresses like him, how he has the same mannerisms, but even the play styling sometimes is very reminiscent of Patrick Mahomes. And I think that is what's allowing Nebraska to be pretty successful so far. So I do think that this is going to be another one where it's going to be a good game. And I'm not going to lie, I wouldn't be shocked if Nebraska pulled the upset. I really would not be shocked. I do think Nebraska is a tough team. I think Nebraska is going to win. That's a little bit of a hot take. I think Nebraska is going to win by 1, maybe 2 points. I think this is going to be another close game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. But I do think Nebraska is going to give Michigan a run for their money. I do think so. Now the next game I want to talk about is Miami versus Florida. Now, I do think this is going to be a pretty good game, okay? I do think that after Florida's loss to USF, it seems like they were never able to find their rhythm back. Right? Now, don't get me wrong. I do think that Florida is still a pretty good team. I do think DJ Lagway is still a good quarterback. But I think with Miami's defense being a lot better, I think with the way that Carson Beck has been playing so far, I think especially with having offensive weapons such as CJ Daniels, I think that Miami is still going to beat Florida. I think they're going to win by probably 14 points, like within 2 possessions. But nevertheless, I do think, though, that this is going to be a better game than I think what a lot of people are expecting. I do think this is going to be a good game. I think Miami is still going to win, but I wouldn't push past Florida of this being a 30-40 point game. I don't think that's going to be the case here. So now before we move on to the next section, I want to take a little bit of a break, and I want to tell you to check out the description box down below that gives you all of my social media accounts. If you want to see some daily takes and some daily sports news and opinions, then you can follow my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook. If you want to see what a day in the life looks like for me, then you can check out my Snapchat. If you want to see some quick reactions to whatever has been happening, then you can check out my Threads account, you can check out my X account. And if you are listening to this on Spotify, please be sure to give this a 5-star rating. Please be sure to follow this page so you don't miss a single episode. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please be sure to hit the thumbs up button down below. Please be sure to hit the subscribe button and be sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss a single episode. Now, moving on to the next section, let's talk about the NFL. So let's talk about first a couple of trades that's happened that I think has shocked everyone. So first, the Dallas Cowboys traded Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers for defensive tackle Kenny Clark and a draft pick. Now, this purely has shocked me. And the reason why is because of the fact that Jerry Jones kept telling fans, oh, don't lose sleep over this, right? There were also reports that said that Parsons will be ready for week 1, right, when they were facing the Philadelphia Eagles. And then to see that Micah was actually traded. And then on top of that, there were reports that said that Jerry Jones actually planned to trade Micah. That was the plan the entire time. I'm not a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, right? But I still felt that I was led astray because this entire time I'm thinking that Micah and the Cowboys are going to come to some sort of agreement. The Cowboys are going to pay him. And the fact that they've already had this plan this entire time to trade him is a little bit insane. It's like, what was the point then of telling fans not to lose any sleep? Of course they're going to lose sleep. That's your best pass rusher here that you are trying to trade away. And according to Jerry Jones, it's because they needed to stop the run. Now, that argument really did not make any sense to me, right? If you want to say, you know what, his agent, David Mugolito, was being a little difficult, or Micah was being difficult, and we didn't want to deal with him anymore, okay, I can buy that, okay? Especially with Micah being asleep during one of the preseason games. It was kind of evident that he was going to be traded. If you want to look at those, then okay, I get it. But if your big thing is, oh, we needed to stop the run, why is that your big argument of giving up your best pass rusher? Why? Because let's really think about it here. How many teams in the NFL can you say have a better rushing game than a passing game? You can argue the Baltimore Ravens and maybe the Philadelphia Eagles. Maybe. I think it's even, but just for the purposes of this argument, let's just add them in. That's 2 teams out of 32 teams that you said, oh, we need to stop the run. So basically, you're trying to stop the run for like 2 teams. Because every other team has a better passing game than they do a rushing game. And guess what? When it comes to a team that has a better passing game, then you need a good pass rusher, which would be, oh yeah, Micah Parsons. Now, again, I'm not a Cowboys fan, okay? But just watching this purely as a football fan, as an NFL fan, this did not make any sense as a reason. Again, if you want to say that Micah was being difficult, if you want to say that you couldn't pay him as much as he was asking for, all right, you know what? That's fair. But to say we needed to stop the run, I think it's a little bit of a BS argument. I'm sorry. That is one of the worst arguments I think I've heard. So the Packers' defense just got that much better. And I guess with the Cowboys, they could stop the run because we saw that week one held Saquon to 60 yards rushing, I guess. But you still lost against the Eagles. I mean, I think you're still going to struggle this season. So, I don't know. I think the season is going to be really, really interesting, but I do think that that is a decision that Jerry is just going to regret. I truly think so. So that's enough of that situation. Now let's look at the fact that the Washington Commanders traded Brian Robinson Jr. to the 49ers for a draft pick. Now, I thought this was really interesting because last season, Brian Robinson did not have a bad season. In fact, he actually had a pretty good season. Okay, so I was really shocked as to why they decided to trade him. I don't know if it's because you want to give Austin Eckler more playing time, or you want to look more at Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt, who you just picked up. And so because of the three of them, you figured, okay, we're going to get rid of Brian Robinson. I don't know what it may be, but I thought it was really interesting that the Commanders decided that they just want to let him go. And then from the 49ers perspective, I do think this is really interesting because you picked up another running back when the big thing is about how Christian McCaffrey is going to perform this season. I think this is actually really, really interesting because is there a little bit of doubt that you think that McCaffrey is going to be hurt for this season, so you need another solid running back? Like, what was the thing behind that? So keeping along the conversations about that, let's look at some of the injuries that has happened so far. So actually starting with Washington, the fact that Austin Eckler just tore his Achilles. He tore his Achilles when the Commanders were playing the Green Bay Packers. Now, that hurts. Obviously, he's going to be out for the rest of the season. That's, of course, obvious. So we're going to see a lot more playing time from Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt. But that's why I think it was really interesting that they got rid of Brian Robinson. Because you would have Brian Robinson as your starting running back, and you can still switch him and Ja'Cory in and out. Allow Ja'Cory to get a lot more of the field and get him a lot more of the drives. So I really don't understand that. So now you're going to have Ja'Cory being your full starting running back. So let's just see what happens with them, okay? And then speaking on with the 49ers, Christian McCaffrey has been dealing with a calf injury. Now, last week he was healthy. He did play the entire game, but now because of this lingering injury, there is this question as to whether McCaffrey will be healthy. There is this question of, will they sit him out in this week too, right? Or are you just going to allow CMC to just push through? He was limited in practice for this week, so I wouldn't be shocked if CMC just did not play for this week and even for next week. Allow him to just rest, be healthy, so that way he can still perform for the rest of the season, right? Because the last thing you want to do is be able to push him and push him beyond his limits, and then something tears or he has the season-ending injury, and then again, you're an entire season without him. Right? That's the last thing you want. But I do think that San Francisco was a little hesitant about CMC, which is probably why they want to go pick up Brian Robinson, right? Have a really good backup. So let's see what happens. Now, you do also with the Commanders have Dietrich Wise Jr., who went out with a season-ending quad injury, which to the point that he had to get carted off the field, which is a really, really scary sight to see, especially given the fact that we are in week 2 and we are already seeing season-ending injuries. Between him, Austin Eckler, you have Jaden Reed, who has a broken collarbone. I don't think he's going to be out for the entire season, but I don't think we are going to see him until like December, right? If he decides to come back for the rest of the season, because the Packers may actually sit him out for the entire season, right? Just let him heal and then let him come back next season. I don't know. Let's see what happens. But I think it's just crazy that we've already had so many crazy injuries already, and we're just in week 2. So I wanted to recap a couple of games that's happened that I think that we just need to talk about, okay? Week 1 games. First, I want to talk about the Ravens versus the Bills, because that has to be one of the best comeback wins I think I have seen in a while. So, just to provide a little bit of context, it's the 4th quarter with 4 minutes left, okay? The Ravens are up 40-25. Again, 4 minutes left. You saw fans leaving the stadium because they just thought that, okay, you know what, the Bills lost. Let's at least get a little bit of a head start on traffic. You have people turning off the TV. Even statistics show that the Bills had a 0.9% chance of winning, okay? Now, everyone who turned off the TV, everyone who left at that point, you should not have done that. Because when I tell you that Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills cranked it up, turned it up, and ended up winning 41-40. Again, one of the craziest comebacks I think I have seen in a while. It was absolutely insane. Now, I think the biggest thing that people have been talking about was that fourth down, right? So, Ravens had the ball. It was 4th and 3, right? We're in the fourth quarter. And instead of allowing, I don't know, Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson to just rush it in to get that first down, they decided to just punt it. I didn't understand why they would do that, right? I don't know why you would do that. Now, I don't know if it's because John Harbaugh, who is the head coach for the Ravens, thought, okay, you know what, let's just punt it away. We're going to get 3 straight stops. They're going to punt it back, and then we get the ball back. It's clean slate. I don't know if that was the thinking, but that was truly one of the worst decisions I think a coach has made, because that punt just allowed Buffalo to go on like this crazy, crazy run, to get touchdown after touchdown, to get stops after stops. That just allowed the Bills to go on their run to make that crazy comeback. Now, of course, if I was the head coach, if a lot of people were the head coach, they would just say, okay, it's 4th and 3, just like go for it, right? You have one of the best running backs in the league. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Just go for it, right? What's the worst that could happen? I don't know exactly what John was thinking, but I think that is truly a harmful decision, because that truly impacted the game. That really changed the momentum of the game. It was a very great game to watch, but we saw an absolute masterclass from Josh Allen to be able to come back from being down 15 with 4 minutes left and be able to have that win. Absolutely insane. So that was the first game that was crazy. And the second game, of course, were the Vikings versus the Bears. Now, in the fourth quarter, right, the Bears are up 17-6. It was not looking good for starting quarterback J.J. McCarthy or just from the Vikings team altogether. But JJ completely turned it up in the fourth quarter. Now, first 3 quarters, he didn't play that good. He was really quiet. He was really passive. But fourth quarter, completely took over. It was like a complete 180 you saw from the Vikings, and they ended up winning 27-24. It became a great game by the fourth quarter. Now, am I still sold on JJ McCarthy? No. I still don't think he's a good quarterback. Again, my mind could change by like week 6, week 7. But as of right now, I am not the biggest fan of him. I don't think he is that good. But what I will say, though, is he had a good fourth quarter against the Bears. That, I think, if we saw a lot more of that, then I would change my mind. I would say, okay, he is good. But for me, I don't see a lot of that with him. I didn't see that when he was at Michigan. I'm just not sold on him yet, right? But nevertheless, I do think that JJ had a great fourth quarter. That was a great comeback. That was great being clutch, and especially being there when your team needed you most, right? That's what I was most impressed about JJ McCarthy, especially for this being his first regular season NFL game that he has ever played in. To be able to come through for your team at that moment in your very first game, extremely impressive. Could not be any more proud of him, okay? Now, I do hope he continues to play like he did in the fourth quarter for an entire game, right? Or for at least for the majority of the games, right? For the upcoming weeks. But I will say that fourth quarter performance, absolute masterpiece from JJ McCarthy. We'll say very, very impressive. That's enough of football. Now let's move on to the last section, which is all about boxing. So we had a big fight this past weekend, right? Terrence Crawford versus Canelo Alvarez. Now, arguably, this is one of the biggest fights of the century. And this is not necessarily just me saying that. This is a lot of analysts that are saying that. A lot of announcers that are saying this, right? And the reason why is because Terrence Crawford jumped 3 weight classes. 3! He jumped 3 weight classes to go and fight Canelo. So, Of course, we all know, for those of you who watch boxing, Canelo is la creme de la creme, right? He is the man. He is one of the best boxers that there is just right now, right? So now we have Terence Crawford, who's jumping 3 weight classes to go face to face with Canelo. So there was the big question of, will Terence be able to handle it? Will be able to handle Canelo's punches? Will be able to handle Canelo's power? Will he be able to handle all of the muscle and a lot of the weight that he put onto his body? And let me tell you something. All of that, the answer is yes. Because if you watch the fight, Terence was the more aggressive fighter. He was the one that was, in fact, putting pressure on Canelo. You saw Canelo got a little bit scared, especially after the first hit that he got to the face in round 6. And then he had a couple of uppercuts. He had a few jabs to the face. I mean, Canelo truly was stunned in this fight. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Canelo did not have a good fight, because he did. He did have a very good, high IQ, very tactical fight, right? He's a very, very technical fighter, right? He likes to study the opponent fighter. He likes to see what moves you're going to do, and that's when he goes in and attacks, and that's what we saw from Canelo. So I think he had a great fight. I think what we just saw was Crawford being a better fighter, a more aggressive fighter, right? And he truly was taking over for the majority of the fight. Now, I predicted that Crawford was going to win by unanimous decision. And if you don't believe me, you can check out my TikTok, my Instagram. I made a video about it. But what I will say, though, is the way that Crawford was super aggressive, that I did not expect. That I truly was not expecting, okay? Now, I do think this was a great fight to watch. I'm so happy for Crawford because he is a 5-division champ. He is a 3-time undisputed champion for 3 different weight classes. I mean, no one truly is touching Terence Crawford when it comes to being a great fighter. And now this is my time to say that Crawford truly is the best fighter in boxing. He has beaten your favorites. Sean Porter, beat. Errol Spence, beat. Canelo now, beat. What more do you want him to do? That fight officially cemented his legacy in boxing history. He has really cemented himself as one of the greatest boxers of all time. Truly. He has cemented. Now, will I say he is the greatest of all time? Probably not. But do I think he is one of the greatest fighters of all time? Absolutely. I would put him up there. Because last night really showed how much no one was really touching him. Now, you can go and say, oh, well, he's only had 41 fights. Well, now 42 with Canelo on Saturday. And he has not had a lot of fights. He wasn't in a lot of fights like Canelo. And what I want to say is this, okay? Crawford has called out so many fighters in the past. He's called out everybody. And nobody wanted to fight him. So how can you blame him for not being in as many fights as Canelo when no one wants to fight him? When no one wants to be in the ring with him? I think that shows you how great of a fighter he is, to the point that your faves are not even willing to step into the ring with him. I truly think that Crawford, like I said before, has cemented himself as one of the best boxers in history. Okay? And I don't say that lightly. He has cemented himself as one of the best boxers of all time. It truly is insane. I think it's a great win for Crawford. Congratulations to him. And I cannot wait to see if he decides to go and step into the ring one last time before retirement. And so, keeping on the conversation, of course, about boxing and fights, let's look at what some of the biggest fights are that are coming up. So the first fight that I want to talk about is that Sebastian Fundora will be facing Keith Thurman in October. Now, Sebastian has been making a name for himself for the past year or two, right? He has been truly making a name and really knocking people out or winning by unanimous decisions and being a champion, right? Winning some belts. I mean, he really has been making a big name for himself. And then you have Keith Thurman, who is a big name, but he has not stepped into the ring in a while. I mean, we haven't seen Keith Thurman in a fight in the past couple of years. So I do think this is going to be a great fight. Of course, people really respect Keith Thurman for how good of a fighter he is. And I think that this will be the big fight for Fundora to really show the world whether he is really that guy or if it's just all talk and all hype. I cannot wait for this fight. Now, the next fight I want to talk about is the fact that we are getting a Eubank Jr. versus Ben rematch in November. Now, if you missed it back in April, Eubank Jr. ended up winning by unanimous decision. So the fact that we're getting a rematch of this generational beef is great. It will be such a great fight. I think Ben is going to come back and he's going to be a lot better. He's going to be a lot more aggressive. And I do think we are going to see an overall better performance from Conor Benn. I cannot wait for this fight. Now, the next fight I want to talk about is Lamont Roach is facing Pitbull Cruz in December. Now, Roach's last fight was against Tank Davis, where controversially it was a majority draw, right? That's where you saw Tank Davis take the knee, which later became because he had oil in his eyes, and people felt that should have been considered a knockdown, because if it was considered a knockdown, then Roach actually would have won the fight. There was this big controversy around that. So now we get to see Lamont actually face Pitbull Cruz, who everyone knows is also a great fighter, right? We're going to see Lamont face another great fighter, really see if he is the real deal, and see if he is able to keep up with Pitbull. Now, the next fight that are in the talks, but not necessarily confirmed yet, is that Errol Spence Jr. will be entering the ring again to face Jermell Charlo. Now, both fighters have not stepped into the ring in a couple of years. Errol Spence's last fight, of course, was against Terrence Crawford, where he ended up losing. And then with Charlo, his last fight was against Canelo Alvarez, which, pretty ironic because Canelo and Crawford just fought each other. Now, apparently there are talks about them fighting in 2026, and I think this is also going to be a really interesting fight. Will both fighters be able to keep up the same speed and power and skills that they had beforehand, or are they going to be a little bit slower because they have not entered the ring in a couple of years? But first, we need to see if this fight is even confirmed or if this is just a rumor. So we're going to put that in the back burner, but please keep this fight in mind because I do think that if this is true, this will be a good fight. Now, the next fight, that's another one that is not necessarily confirmed, is that Shakur Stevenson is supposed to be fighting Teofimo Lopez. Now, you may be wondering, well, what do you mean by it's not necessarily confirmed? So Shakur basically made a tweet, right, on X and basically said, oh, I want to fight Teofimo Lopez, and I sent out the agreement, whatever, and I sent out the proposal, and I did not hear back, whatever. And then Teofimo responded and basically said, oh, I agree to it. I'll see you in early 2026. I'm just paraphrasing here. But what I will say, though, is that it's very interesting that they put that on their public platforms on X, right? Now, we don't have an official report, right, from Yahoo Sports or AP or any other reputable source that confirms that they will in fact be fighting. But if this is true, that Shakur and Teofimo are going to fight, I do think this is going to be a great fight because we all know that Teofimo Lopez is a great technical fighter. He's a great defender. But guess what? Shakur Stevenson is one of the best defensive fighters just in boxing, period, right? Now, people have been talking about his matches and how he's been very boring, very passive. He doesn't have any great wins. So, especially against someone like Teofimo, he would really need to step it up and really put on a performance against especially Teofimo to really get the respect from the media, from the fans, just from everybody. But again, we're going to have to wait to see if this is even a confirmed fight or if this is just a rumor. But I really do hope that this is a confirmed fight because this will be such a great fight to watch. Now, the next fight I want to talk about is that Jake Paul will be fighting Tank Davis in November. Now, not really excited about this match, I'm not going to lie to you, but I understand, especially from Tank's perspective, why he would want to do this fight, okay? There are reports about him considering retiring from boxing, how he's really not in it mentally like he used to. So having this type of fight against Jake Paul, who I'm not necessarily a big fan of, would allow him to just basically get paid, right? He can enter the ring again, get his money, and then from there he can decide as to whether he wants to retire or not, right? But I really do hope that Tank Davis does not retire because I need him to have his match against Shakur Stevenson. Hopefully have it not in Vegas. I'm hoping for it to be in New Jersey, in Newark at the Prudential Center. But if he does retire, then I do think that having a major payout like this one here against Jake Paul would just be a good way to kind of like end things, right? Get your money and then leave, be with your family, right? I'm not necessarily excited for this fight in the sense that I think this is going to be a good fight, like the fights that I mentioned beforehand, but this will be a really interesting fight to see, nevertheless. And the second fight that I want to talk about is that it is confirmed that Floyd Mayweather will be entering the ring once again to face Mike Tyson in an exhibition match. Now, of course, both of these guys are way beyond their prime. This is purely just a money grab. Now, this is another fight that I'm not necessarily excited to watch in the fact that I don't think that it's going to be a good fight, but I think it will be interesting to see two legends just face each other in an exhibition match, okay? I do think that this will be really interesting because there's always this question of could Mayweather beat Tyson, right? In both of their primes. And I mean, yeah, we're going to see them face each other, but again, it's way beyond their prime. It's when both of them are extremely tired and they're basically just doing it for money at this point. I do think this is still going to be an interesting fight to watch, but don't really have your hopes and expectations up like with the other matches like I talked about beforehand. But this does brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to tune in next Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we will be talking more WNBA, more football. We'll be talking about tennis. We may be talking about soccer. So much more to talk about for next week. So, see you next week. Bye.